I found out that Drew Barrymore has a talk show. I didn't know that. I thought she was a movie actress, and I always loved her movies and all that. I found out she's actually the host of a talk show, and I wish I would have found out under better circumstances, because evidently it's been a couple of years that she's been doing this. But I find out that she has this talk show because she's scabbing on the Writers Guild, and you go, why would you be doing this? Why would you want this kind of attention in this moment when all the country, all the working people, their eyes are on this? Why would you want to be the most visible, the most famous scab in the country? Makes no sense to me. But here to share some thoughts on maybe there's an answer here that I'm not getting. I've asked David Slack to come talk with us. He's a TV writer, producer, former WGA West board member. Also a guy who very active on Twitter, which is how I found his thread. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Rick.
So walk me through this. Why?
Well, why you'd have to ask Drew Barrymore. There are a lot of things we could speculate, but it's a complicated situation because so everybody knows the WGA is on strike. Everybody knows SAG-AFTRA is on strike. But beyond that, it gets into the nuance of, how labor unions work, because SAG-AFTRA has multiple bargaining units. Talk shows, daytime talk shows, soap operas, game shows are covered under a contract called Net Code, and that contract is not on strike. So to be clear, Drew Barrymore is not scabbing against SAG-AFTRA by going on her show right now. That contract is totally fine. The problem is her show is WGA covered. Her show, since its inception, has employed WGA writers who are currently out walking a picket line. And by going back on the air, it is very hard to believe that someone isn't performing work that was previously done by striking workers. And you know what we call a person who does work that's performed by striking workers? That's a scab. In the case of Drew Barrymore, and by the way, she's not alone. The people on The View, which is also WGA covered and has been since its inception, they've been scabbing this entire time. The Talk is about to come back. The Jennifer Hudson Show is back. Bill Maher is about to come back. So there are a lot of people in this situation. What's been so disappointing about Drew Barrymore is a couple of things. One, she's already shown a willingness to not cross our picket lines. She refused to go on to host the MTV Movie Awards early in our strike and stood in solidarity with us. So this is somebody who really showed that she was comfortable and confident in breaking contracts for the sake of the collective good, for the sake of standing in solidarity with labor. And now she's flipped on that. But she also put out a public statement that erroneously said that she wasn't breaking any WGA rules, which is just not true. It is very hard to imagine that anyone on a show that normally employs writers, and trust me, the TV show would not have writers if they didn't need them. They don't pay for anything they don't need. They try not to pay for things they do need. But so it's very hard to believe that that a show that normally needs writers can be done without those writers present, without somebody scabbing on those jobs. So, and she decided to become the main character. I don't know why.
No, and this is one of those moments, I tell the story often. When my mother passed, I moved in with my grandparents, and my grandfather said, "You don't go across the street, and you don't play with that guy's grandkids. You don't go anywhere over there." And I never knew why. And I asked him a couple years later, and I said, "What was that all about?" And he said the guy had crossed a picket line like 40 years before. It was a railroad picket, and the entire community ostracized the guy and the entire family. And this is where I'm looking at this moment going, as a society, we should be holding these scabs accountable in public, especially someone as high profile as Drew Barrymore. This is one of those things where the message that's being sent is all the wrong messages, or at least I think so. I'm curious your thoughts.
I completely agree. I mean, and you can say, oh, she didn't understand, she was misinformed. That's fine. She's now been correctly informed and has a chance to make this right by stopping doing her show. You can say, well, she cares about her crew and wants to put them back to work. But the fact is, by going back to work with scab labor while we're still on strike, she may be putting her crew back to work, but she's providing the studios we're on strike against with content, which prolongs the strike. So her crew may be working, but every other crew in Hollywood, it might be out of work that much longer because of what she's doing. And that's really hurtful, because it's not just, strikes are hard on everybody. And it's not just writers and actors on strike who are hurting. There are IATSE crew members and Teamster truck drivers and all these other businesses in LA and New York and other markets that depend on the entertainment industry. The California economy is losing about $30 million a day because, Bob Iger and David Zaslav and another couple of billionaire CEOs can't admit that they've already lost. And it's time to sit down and make a deal.
No, and
so,
again, we started the show off, playing a quote from a rich guy saying, we need to cause more unemployment so that, those working people, they get desperate again and they're back in their place. And you're part of that. I mean, the writers are part of this. You've got the very wealthy who could easily afford all of your demands and all of your requests easily. They would not cost them very much at all. But it's the point. It's the point that they control you, and that you should be grateful for having a job, and that you should be in your place. And I see this more as that than it is about the money or about fighting over AI or any of that other stuff. Do you agree?
I think there's absolutely an element of class warfare. I think for the CEOs, I think this is like if you owned a paper mill and all of a sudden the trees started trying to tell you how many that you could pulp and turn into paper. I think it's inconceivable to them. And, one thing that's tricky for us with both actors and writers, we have some members who have done very, very well. There are people who get fabulously wealthy, and Drew Barrymore is one of them. Yeah. She's worth many millions of dollars. And so the public's perception sometimes is that, well, what are you on strike for? You're all millionaires. But the fact is, we are labor. We do not decide how much we get paid. We negotiate hard over how much we get paid, but it's ultimately what the bosses will allow. The Writers Guild of America is a middle-class union. Most of our members do not make the fabulous money. We're on strike. It's crazy. We struck for 100 days in 2007, 2008 to get coverage over the internet, the entire internet. Took 100 days. And if we hadn't done that, every single streaming show out there would be a non-union show, not just for writers, but for actors, for directors, for crews, for truck drivers. Now we're on strike this was day 135. So longer than it took to get the internet. And what are we on strike for? Fair pay, a cost of living raise. We had 2 years of 6% plus inflation. And these guys are trying to turn that inflation into an upside for them by limiting our pay raise and stopping us from getting basic protections against things like AI and against free rewrites. It's just, it is very much an element of class warfare. It is very much that at the end of the day, these guys who, David Zaslav gets about $250 million a year. Like 2 Zaslavs could cover everything the WGA is asking for 3 years. And he's already lost his company $300 to $500 million. The WGA's entire ask per year from his company is $47 million. So collectively, these guys are losing billions to maybe save millions. And you got to ask yourself, why are they doing that?
Well, I go back to what I said a moment ago. It's all about control. It's all about, we're going to keep you in your place, and you're going to do what you're told, and you're going to be happy about it.
Yeah, and it sure as hell looks to me like they're violating their fiduciary duty to their shareholders over this stuff. And, you look at some of the companies we're on strike against are Netflix, Apple, Amazon, we've got tech companies. And for them, I think they don't want their other employees to know that a union can beat them. Because that's, if we beat them, how's that look to Amazon warehouse workers or the people who work at Apple stores or the coders at Netflix? All of these are, largely non-union jobs that are ripe for unionization and in the most positive environment for labor organizing that we've seen, in maybe 60 years. So, I think they very much want us to lose. But the fact is, we're 135 days into this, and our solidarity is rock solid. We had a picket of showrunners. There's, the writers who run television shows, who generally do very well. And there's not actually much at stake for a lot of them in this negotiation. We had, I I think about 400 show up at the Fox lot. It was so crowded you could barely walk, and they donated collectively in various forms with gift cards and Venmo and stuff. They donated about $40,000 to help our members get through this. So our solidarity is unbroken. It's just time for them to sit down and make a deal. And the only reason I think that they won't is they can't get on the same page with each other because they're competitors. And I think it just rankles. I think they just don't want to accept that a little union of ordinary people could bring them to their knees.
Yeah.